What happens when you touch the only thing a man loves more than his own life? Harlem, New York. It was Wednesday, the 14th of April, 1937, approximately 6:45 in the morning. Sunlight fell through lace curtains onto pink wallpaper decorated with painted rabbits. A ceramic ballerina lamp glowed softly on the nightstand, and Ellsworth Bumpy Johnson, the most dangerous man in Harlem, sat on the edge of his daughter's bed, holding an ivory comb and a white satin ribbon. If you want to find out how this incredible story ends, hit that like button, subscribe to the channel, and click the notification bell so you never miss our next videos. But let us return to that morning. 6-year-old Ruthie opened her eyes at 6:51. The first thing she saw was her father's silhouette against the window. The first thing she said, "Daddy, you came before Mommy again." This was their ritual. Every morning Bumpy was home. He woke his daughter before Margaret could come upstairs. Every morning Ruthie pretended surprise. And every morning the man whose name made entire blocks fall silent smiled in a way he smiled only here, only with her. "Come here, baby girl. Time to braid your hair." His hands moved slowly through her tangled curls. These same hands had signed orders that ended lives, had shaken hands with Lucky Luciano himself, had built an empire that stretched across every street of northern Manhattan. Now they worked with the tenderness of a man touching the most precious thing in his universe. "Daddy," Ruthie swung her legs while he braided. "Mabel said her mommy said you are a scary man. Is that true?" Bumpy's hands paused for one heartbeat, then continued their work. "What do you think, baby girl?" "I think Mabel is a liar. You are not scary. You are my daddy." He tied the white satin ribbon around the finished braid, looked at his daughter in the mirror, saw her smile. "For you, never, baby girl. For you, I am just a daddy who is bad at braiding hair." At that exact moment, 3 miles away in a cramped room in the South Bronx, 3 men studied a photograph of the same little girl. Samuel Cowan, 34, a small-time schemer who had spent his whole life looking for the big score. Victor Palladino, 28, a failed boxer with a flattened nose and desperate eyes. Raymond Gillis, 31, a driver who asked no questions as long as he got his cut. "Some Negro racketeer from Harlem," Cowan was saying, tapping the photograph. "Runs a few gambling spots. Has some money, but not enough to attract serious attention. We grab the girl, ask for 50,000. We are rich by next week." They did not know whose daughter smiled up at them from that photograph. They did not know that the man they dismissed as some Negro racketeer had connections to every major crime family in New York. They did not know that by nightfall they would become the most hunted men on the eastern seaboard. They had no idea that this photograph would become their death sentence. Know what happens when you poke a sleeping lion? These 3 were about to find out. The black Packard with New Jersey plates arrived at the corner of 135th Street and Lenox Avenue at 11:53. Cowan sat in the back, watching the school doors, his palms slick with sweat. Palladino sat beside him, shoulders tense. Gillis kept the engine running. 12:17. The school doors opened. Children poured onto the sidewalk, laughing, pushing, living their small lives in complete ignorance of what was about to happen. Cowan spotted her immediately. 2 braids with white ribbons, dark dress. A drawing clutched in her small hands, 3 stick figures under a yellow sun with the words, "My family," written in unsteady letters. "That is her. Go." Palladino crossed the sidewalk with the confidence of a man who had done this before. He had not. None of them had. "Your daddy sent us. Uncle James got sick. We are here to take you home. Ruthie looked at the car, looked back at the school. Uncle James was never late, never, but these men knew her daddy. They knew Uncle James by name. 8 seconds of hesitation. Then she climbed into the car. The door slammed. Gillis floored the accelerator. The Packard vanished around the corner in under 14 seconds. On the asphalt remained only the drawing. 3 figures under a yellow sun. The word family slowly disappearing as wind pushed the paper toward the gutter. At 12:31, James Harris arrived at the school. 6 minutes late because of a flat tire that was no accident. The teacher pointed at empty sidewalk. Some men took her, said they were from her father. James saw the drawing being carried toward the drain. His face turned the color of ash. At 12:38, he stood before Bumpy Johnson in the back room of a pool hall on 145th Street. He could not speak, could barely breathe. He simply held out the crumpled drawing with its 3 figures and yellow sun. Bumpy looked at the paper for 3 seconds, at the smiling stick figures, at his daughter's handwriting. Then he raised his eyes. James Harris had worked for Bumpy Johnson for 7 years, had seen him order men eliminated without blinking, had watched him negotiate with killers while eating breakfast. But what he saw in those eyes now made him want to run. Bumpy's voice came out barely above a whisper. Who? James did not know. Find out. You have 1 hour. By 2:15 that afternoon, Harlem had closed. Not officially, not with locked doors and shuttered windows, but in the way that mattered. The streets that normally hummed with life fell into unnatural silence. Word had spread faster than any telegraph could carry it. Someone had taken Bumpy Johnson's daughter. The pool hall, called Baby Grand, had transformed into a war room. Smoke hung thick from 15 cigarettes. A map of Harlem covered the billiard table, marked with red lines and blue circles and black X marks. 23 men stood in that room. Every lieutenant, every sector commander, every key informant who could be reached. They had arrived within 90 minutes of the first call, dropping everything, because when Bumpy called with that particular tone, you did not ask questions. You came. He spoke quietly. So quietly every man leaned forward to hear. This was more terrifying than any shout. My daughter was taken, 6 years old, white ribbons in her hair. I do not know who did this, but I will know. The room held its breath. The man who brings me information about the kidnappers receives $20,000 and my eternal gratitude. 20,000, enough to buy 3 houses, enough to retire on, enough to change a life completely. The man who knows something and stays silent becomes an accomplice. I do not forgive accomplices. Never. His eyes moved across the room, meeting each gaze. Harlem is closed. All operations stopped. Every man on the street works the search. The kidnappers have 48 hours to return my child unharmed. After that, everyone involved will cease to exist. Not quickly, not easily. Jackson, his right hand for 11 years, stepped forward. What about the Italians? Send word to all 5 families. Anyone who helps finds her earns my friendship. Anyone who helped take her earns my attention. The way he said attention made 3 men in the room shift where they stood. By 4 o'clock, 112 of Bumpy's men walked the streets. By 5, 3 independent sources reported a black Packard with New Jersey plates near the school. By 7, he knew who owned the car. By 9, he had names: Samuel Cowan, Victor Palladino, Raymond Gillis. Nobody, absolute nobody. When Bumpy heard these names, he laughed. for the first time in 9 hours. But this laugh made the men around him feel ice in their veins. They do not know whose daughter they took. They still do not know. He could have sent 20 armed men to the house in Newark where they were hiding, could have ended this in an hour. But Bumpy Johnson understood something about fear that most men never learn. The violence itself is not what breaks people. The anticipation is, the waiting, the knowing something terrible approaches but not knowing when. These men would learn what real fear felt like, and then they would return his daughter themselves. They will find out tomorrow, Bumpy said, the right way, and when they do, they will crawl back here on their knees. In a rented house in Newark that same night, little Ruthie Johnson sat on a bare mattress in a room with barred windows. Her white ribbons were gone, lost somewhere in the car. She had stopped crying because crying did not help. She wanted her daddy. She wanted her mommy. She wanted to go home. She did not know that her father had already found her, did not know that men were watching the house, did not know that the people who took her were about to experience the worst days of their lives. But her daddy had not forgotten her, had not stopped working for a single second, and within 48 hours she would be home. The men who took her would beg forgiveness on their knees, and they would pay for the privilege of being allowed to live, temporarily. Thursday morning, April 15th, 7:12. The kitchen of the rented house in Newark smelled of burnt coffee and fear. Samuel Cowan stood at the counter, pouring his third cup with hands that had not stopped trembling since he woke from a sleep that never really came. On the windowsill, a small radio played soft jazz between news segments. He reached over to adjust the volume, wanted to catch the morning report. What he heard next ended his life as he knew it. According to our sources, the daughter of Ellsworth Johnson, known in Harlem as Bumpy, remains missing following yesterday's abduction. Johnson, described as one of the most influential and dangerous criminal figures in northern Manhattan, has reportedly offered a $20,000 reward. Sources indicate that hundreds of men have been mobilized, and the 5 major Italian crime families have pledged cooperation in the search. The coffee mug slipped from Cowan's fingers. Brown liquid exploded across the counter, dripped onto the floor. He did not notice, did not move, did not breathe. "Victor!" His voice cracked like breaking glass. "Victor, get in here!" Palladino ran into the kitchen, buttoning his shirt, boxer's instincts bringing him ready for a fight. Gillis stumbled down the stairs behind him, still half drunk from the night before. "Listen." Bumpy Johnson, who controls significant illegal operations in Harlem and maintains close relationships with Lucky Luciano and other major organized crime figures. The radio kept talking. None of them heard another word. Palladino grabbed the door frame like a man who had just taken a punch to the liver. Gillis stopped on the bottom stair, his face going from confused to terrified in the space of 3 seconds. Bumpy Johnson. Cowan's voice had gone quiet, deadly quiet. "We kidnapped Bumpy Johnson's daughter. Do you know what it feels like to realize you have just signed your own death warrant? To understand in a single moment that everything you thought you knew was wrong and the mistake you made cannot be undone?" These 3 men were learning that feeling right now. "Holy Mother of God," Gillis whispered, "we are dead men." Cowan turned to face them. His eyes held the look of someone who has just watched their future collapse into ash. "We are already dead. We just do not know it yet." The next hour was chaos. 3 men screaming at each other, blaming, proposing solutions that fell apart the moment they were spoken. "Run?" Cowan grabbed the telephone, called a contact in Philadelphia. The man hung up the instant he heard the name Bumpy Johnson. Called another in Baltimore. Same result. Called a third in Boston. The line went dead before he finished his sentence. Overnight, word had spread through every criminal network on the eastern seaboard. Anyone who helped these three would share their fate. Turn themselves in to police? Gillis suggested this with desperation in his voice. They cannot reach us in prison. Cowan shook his head. You do not understand. He will reach us anywhere. And in prison, there is nowhere to run. Contact the Italians? Beg for protection? Palladino made the call, came back 5 minutes later, white as fresh snow. They said we are on our own. Nobody damages their relationship with Bumpy for us. Nobody. Then Cowan looked out the window, really looked for the first time that morning. A car sat across the street, black sedan. 2 men inside, not hiding, not pretending to be anything other than what they were. Just sitting, watching, waiting. A car that had not been there yesterday. A car that had probably been there all night. They know. Cowan's voice was barely a whisper. They already know where we are. From upstairs came the sound of a child crying. Ruthie's voice, small and broken. I want to go home. I want my daddy. Let me go home. 3 grown men stood frozen in that kitchen, listening to a 6-year-old girl sob. The same child who stood between them and the most terrifying man in New York. The same child they had stolen for $50,000 that would never come. At 9 o'clock exactly, the telephone rang. Cowan stared at it like it was a coiled snake. It rang again, and again. On the 7th ring, he finally lifted the receiver with a hand slick with sweat. The voice on the other end was calm, almost friendly. The voice of a man discussing the weather or perhaps ordering lunch. Mr. Cowan, my name is Jackson. I represent the interests of Mr. Johnson. He would like to discuss with you the conditions under which you might continue breathing after today. Cowan's throat closed. He forced words out. What do you want? Before you say anything, I need you to understand your situation. We know where you are. We know how many of you there are. We know about the shotgun and 2 pistols. We know the girl is on the 2nd floor, room with barred windows. The car across the street is only what we want you to see. Trust me, you are not seeing even a tenth of what is out there. Palladino and Gillis pressed close, straining to hear. Mr. Johnson wants his daughter, alive, healthy, without a single scratch. That is the only requirement. In exchange, he is prepared to discuss conditions under which you might walk away from this alive. What conditions? We will discuss those later. For now, think carefully about your choices. We will call at noon. Click. Dial tone. Are you prepared for what happens when a man like Bumpy Johnson decides to break you without touching you? What followed was not violence. It was art. The art of psychological destruction. At 10:15, Cowan looked out the window again. There were now 2 cars. The second had parked on the opposite side of the street. At 11:20, a delivery boy knocked on the door. Palladino opened it, hand on his pistol. The boy thrust a paper bag at him, said compliments of Mr. Johnson, and ran like the devil himself was chasing him. Inside the bag, a single white satin ribbon, the kind you tie in a little girl's hair, the kind Ruthie had been wearing when they took her. Palladino dropped the bag like it had burned him. At noon exactly, the telephone rang again. Mr. Cowan, have you thought about your situation? We will return the girl. Today, right now. Just tell us where. Mr. Cowan? Jackson's voice remained perfectly calm. You do not seem to understand. You are not negotiating. You are listening. Mr. Johnson wants you to understand the depth of your mistake, to feel it. Every minute, every hour, You took his child. Now you will learn what fear feels like. The same fear a little girl feels in an unfamiliar house surrounded by strangers. We have not touched her. She is unharmed. Good. That is the only thing keeping you alive right now. We will call at 6 this evening. 6 more hours of waiting. 6 more hours of watching the cars multiply outside. By 3 in the afternoon, there were 4. By 5, 6. All with men inside, all watching, all waiting. None of them approaching, none of them making any move. That was somehow worse. Gillis had started drinking at 2 and had not stopped. Palladino sat in a corner staring at nothing. The boxer who had never backed down from any fight, now looking like a dog that had been beaten too many times. Cowan paced from window to window, watching the cars, counting the men, calculating odds that grew worse by the hour. At 6 o'clock, the telephone rang. Mr. Johnson is ready to name his conditions. Anything! Cowan's voice cracked. We agree to anything. First, the girl returns tomorrow, April 16th, before noon. Not a scratch, not a bruise, not a tear on her face when she arrives. Yes, agreed. Second, you will apologize, personally, on your knees. Silence. Cowan closed his eyes, thought about what was being asked. Kneeling before a black man in the middle of Harlem. Him, a white man, before hundreds of witnesses. Agreed. Third, you will pay compensation for the damages you have caused. How much? $10,000. Cowan nearly dropped the telephone. You want U.S. to pay. We kidnapped the girl and we have to pay you. Mr. Cowan, you kidnapped Bumpy Johnson's daughter. Yes, you will pay. $10,000 is the price of walking away alive. The alternative is free, but I promise you will not like it. The line went dead. The night that followed was the longest of Samuel Cowan's existence. He did not sleep. None of them did. Every creak of the old wooden house sounded like footsteps. Every passing car brought them to their feet with weapons drawn. At 4 in the morning, Cowan sat at the kitchen table staring at a pile of money. $7,200. Everything they had scraped together, his own savings, emptied. Palladino's emergency fund gone. Gillis had sold the Packard for a fraction of its value to a buyer who smelled desperation and offered pennies on the dollar. 2,800 short. Cowan picked up the telephone and started dialing. Every contact he had ever made. Every favor ever owed. Every friend, every associate, every acquaintance. Sam, you are a dead man. Do not call me again. Click. I heard what you did. Lose this number. Click. Bumpy Johnson. Are you insane? I never knew you. Click. 37 calls. 37 rejections. The criminal underworld had unanimously decided that Samuel Cowan no longer existed. Helping him meant sharing his fate. Nobody was willing to take that risk. At 7:30, he made one final call. His brother in Connecticut. Family. Surely family would help. Tommy, it is Sam. I need money. 2,800. Today. I will explain everything later. Just, Sam. His brother's voice was ice. I got a call last night. A very polite man explained what you did. Explained what happens to people who help you. I have a wife, Sam. I have children. Tommy, please, do not call this number again. Do not contact anyone in the family. As far as we are concerned, you died yesterday. Click. Cowan sat motionless for a long time, receiver still pressed to his ear, listening to the dial tone. His own brother, his own blood, even they had abandoned him. At 8 o'clock, the telephone rang one final time. Mr. Cowan, are you ready? We have 7,200. That is everything. Everyone has cut us off. Silence. Then Jackson's voice, with something that might have been amusement, Bring what you have. Mr. Johnson will accept." "He will. But you now owe Mr. Johnson $2,800, plus interest. You will work for him until you pay it off. You understand what this means?" Cowan understood. They were now in eternal debt to the man they had tried to rob, would spend whatever remained of their lives doing whatever Bumpy Johnson demanded. "Bring the girl to the corner of 147th Street and St. Nicholas Avenue, 11 o'clock. Come on foot, no weapons, all three of you. We will be there. Mr. Cowan, if the girl has a single mark on her when she arrives, a single bruise, a single tear on her face, the deal is off. And you know what happens then." The line went dead. Upstairs, Ruthie sat on the bare mattress where she had been for 2 days. Her dress was wrinkled, her hair tangled, the careful braids her father had made completely undone. But she was unharmed. Not a scratch, not a bruise. Cowan knelt beside her. "Listen, little girl. We made a terrible mistake. We should not have taken you." Ruthie looked at him with her father's eyes, dark, watchful, missing nothing. "My daddy will punish you," she said calmly. Cowan turned away. He knew she was right. The black sedan arrived at the corner of 147th Street and St. Nicholas Avenue at 10:53, 7 minutes early. Cowan wanted this over, wanted it finished, wanted to crawl out of the nightmare that had consumed the last 48 hours of his existence. He stepped out of the car first. The April morning was bright and clear, the kind of day that should have felt like hope. It felt like walking to the gallows. Palladino emerged next, his boxer shoulders hunched in a way they had never hunched before any fight. Then Gillis, still half drunk, squinting against the sunlight, and finally Ruthie, her small hand gripped in Palladino's fist, her wrinkled dress and tangled hair marking her as a child who had spent 2 days in captivity. The street was not empty. Cowan stopped breathing. Hundreds of people lined the sidewalks, men in work clothes, women with children on their hips, old men leaning on canes, young men with hard eyes and harder fists. The entire neighborhood had come out to witness what was about to happen. They stood in complete silence. Not a single voice, not a single movement, just eyes, hundreds of eyes fixed on the 3 white men who had dared to touch Bumpy Johnson's daughter. In the center of the street stood Bumpy Johnson, alone, no bodyguards visible, no weapons drawn. Just a man in an immaculate gray suit, hands in his pockets, face completely expressionless. He might have been waiting for a bus. He might have been admiring the weather. He might have been deciding which of the 3 men before him would suffer most. What you are about to witness had never happened before in the history of New York crime. 3 men who committed a kidnapping would return their victim, apologize on their knees, and pay $10,000 for the privilege of walking away alive. And it would never happen again. Ruthie saw her father. For one heartbeat, she stood frozen. A small figure in a wrinkled dress, tangled hair falling around her face, no white ribbons anywhere. The child who had cried herself to sleep for 2 nights in a room with barred windows. The child who had asked for her daddy 100 times and received no answer. Then she broke free from Palladino's grip and ran. 20 meters of asphalt, her small shoes slapping against pavement, the only sound on the entire street. 300 people holding their breath, 3 kidnappers frozen in place, and 1 little girl running toward her father with everything she had. Bumpy Johnson dropped to his knees, right there, in the middle of the road. The most dangerous man in Harlem knelt on the asphalt and opened his arms. She crashed into him at full speed, arms around his neck, face buried in his shoulder, small body shaking with sobs she had held back for 2 days. Bumpy closed his eyes, his hands wrapped around her, hands that had done terrible things, hands that had built an empire on fear and violence, hands that had signed orders ending lives without hesitation. Now they simply held a 6-year-old girl who wanted her daddy. 5 seconds passed. 10. 15. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. 300 witnesses stood in absolute silence, watching something none of them would ever forget. Bumpy breathed in the smell of her hair, felt her heartbeat against his chest. She was here. She was alive. She was whole. Ruthie pulled back, looked into her father's eyes. Her voice was small but steady. "Daddy, they lost my ribbons, the white ribbons you tied for me." Something shifted in Bumpy's face, a crack in the mask, just for a moment. "We will find new ones, baby girl." His voice came out rough. "Any ones you want, 100 ribbons. I want the same ones. Do you remember what kind?" "White satin, from the shop on Lenox." "Yes, the same ones." He kissed her forehead, held her for 3 more seconds, then stood, lifting her into his arms. She clung to his neck, face pressed against his collar, finally safe. Bumpy turned to face the kidnappers. His face was a mask once more. The 3 men stood 15 meters away. Cowan held the envelope with the money in hands that would not stop shaking. Palladino stared at the ground. Gillis swayed slightly, whether from alcohol or terror no one could say. "Well," Bumpy's voice carried across the silent street. Cowan forced his feet to move. 1 step, then another. He stopped 5 meters from Bumpy Johnson, close enough to see the complete absence of mercy in those eyes. "Mr. Johnson." His voice broke. He started again. "Mr. Johnson, we made a terrible mistake. We did not know she was your daughter. We beg your forgiveness. On your knees." The words hung in the air. Cowan looked at the hundreds of people watching, understood exactly what was being demanded. Here, now, in the middle of Harlem, he would kneel before a black man, before hundreds of witnesses who would remember this moment for the rest of their lives. The humiliation would be complete, absolute, permanent. He had no choice. Slowly, Samuel Cowan lowered himself to his knees. Behind him, Palladino and Gillis exchanged one final look. Then they knelt as well. 3 white men on their knees in the middle of Black Harlem, April 16th, 1937. An image that would be burned into the memory of everyone present, would be talked about for decades, would become legend. Cowan extended the envelope with trembling hands. $7,200. Everything we could gather. The rest, we will pay. We will do whatever you say. Bumpy did not take the envelope. He looked at the 3 men kneeling before him. 30 seconds of silence. A full minute. The crowd barely breathed. Everyone knew he could order these men eliminated right here, right now. No one would stop him. No one would blame him. They had taken his child. Jackson materialized at his side. "Take the money. Escort these men to the eastern border of Harlem. Make sure they leave. And then, boss." Bumpy looked down at Cowan. The man would not meet his eyes. "Let them go." A murmur rippled through the crowd. He was letting them go. "But remember their faces." Bumpy's voice dropped lower. "And make sure they remember, if they ever set foot in Harlem again, if they ever look in the direction of my family, if they even think about speaking of this." He did not finish. He did not need to. Bumpy Johnson carried his daughter away from the corner of 147th and St. Nicholas. Margaret waited on the doorstep of their home, having not slept for 2 days. The family disappeared behind closed doors. The story seemed to be over. The 3 kidnappers walked away alive. They had received a second chance, had escaped the consequences of their terrible mistake with nothing worse than empty pockets and bruised pride. But Bumpy Johnson never forgot anything, and he never forgave anyone. He simply knew how to wait. Monday, April 19th, 3 days after Ruthie's return, Bumpy Johnson sat in the back room of Baby Grand, conducting business as usual. He smiled at visitors, laughed at jokes, discussed numbers and territories and percentages as if nothing unusual had happened, as if the kidnapping was simply an unpleasant memory already fading. Some people began to whisper that maybe he had actually forgiven the kidnappers, that the money and public humiliation had been sufficient payment, that the matter was closed. They were wrong. Do you know what separates an amateur from a professional when it comes to vengeance? One word: patience. The amateur acts in fury, makes mistakes, leaves witnesses. The professional waits, plans, lets the target believe the danger has passed, and strikes when least expected. Bumpy Johnson was no amateur. In Newark, the 3 kidnappers had returned to their lives. The first 48 hours after leaving Harlem, they stayed locked in their homes, expecting death at any moment. The attack never came. Another 48 hours. Silence. A week. Nothing. Cowan began to breathe easier. Maybe, just maybe, they had actually gotten away with it. The kneeling, the money, the humiliation in front of 300 people, perhaps that had been enough. Perhaps Bumpy Johnson was more reasonable than his reputation suggested. He made plans. Leave Newark. Head to Florida. Start fresh somewhere nobody knew his face or his failures. On the 20th day after the kidnapping, Raymond Gillis did not show up for his regular card game. His friends waited an hour, then 2, then went to his apartment. The door was unlocked, the apartment empty. His coat hung by the entrance, his wallet sat on the kitchen table, his keys rested in the bowl where he always left them. Everything suggested he had stepped out for just a moment and would be right back. He never came back. No body, no note, no witnesses. Raymond Gillis simply ceased to exist, as quietly as smoke vanishing into air. When Cowan heard the news, he locked himself in his apartment for 3 days, did not eat, did not sleep, sat by the window with a loaded pistol, watching the street jumping at every sound. On the 27th day, Victor Palladino decided he needed cigarettes. The corner store was 2 blocks away, a walk he had made 1,000 times. 5 minutes there, 5 minutes back. What could possibly happen in 10 minutes? The store owner later told police he saw Palladino approaching down the street. Then a black car pulled alongside him. 2 men stepped out. There was no struggle, no shouting. Palladino simply got into the car as if he understood there was no point in resisting. The car drove away. That was the last anyone saw of Victor Palladino. This is what true power looks like. Not the violence itself, but the inevitability of it. The absolute certainty that consequences will come, no matter how long you wait, no matter where you run, no matter what precautions you take. Cowan understood now, understood completely. The public forgiveness had been theater, a performance for his daughter, so Ruthie would see her father as a merciful man, a man who gave second chances, a man who let enemies walk away. The real punishment was always coming. It was simply a matter of when. Cowan ran, packed 1 bag, emptied his hidden cash, bought a train ticket to Chicago under a false name, told no one where he was going, rented a room in a cheap hotel on the South Side, paid cash, used a different name at the desk, did not go out during daylight, did not speak to neighbors, did not use the telephone. For 3 months, he lived like a ghost, watching, waiting, hoping that maybe Chicago was far enough, that maybe his precautions were sufficient, that maybe, against all odds, they would not find him. On August 14th, 1937, a hotel maid knocked on his door at 9 in the morning. No answer. She used her master key. Samuel Cowan sat in the armchair by the window, facing the door, as if he had been waiting, as if he knew, in the end, they would come. The cause of his departure from this world was never determined. No signs of violence, no witnesses, no evidence of any kind, just a man who had stopped existing. 3 men, 3 disappearances, 3 lessons for anyone who might ever consider touching Bumpy Johnson's family. The criminal underworld received a message that would echo through decades. Families are sacred, especially the family of Bumpy Johnson. Those who violate this rule might receive forgiveness, might walk away alive, might even begin to believe they have escaped. But justice always comes, quiet, patient, absolute. 1968, 31 years after the kidnapping, Mount Morris Park, on a Thursday afternoon in October. The leaves had turned gold and red, falling slowly through air that smelled of autumn and distant wood smoke. Bumpy Johnson sat on a wooden bench near the fountain, a silver cane resting against his knee. He was 72 years old now, his hair gone white, his movements slower than they once were. But his eyes remained the same, dark, watchful, missing nothing. He tossed breadcrumbs to the pigeons gathered at his feet, a simple pleasure for a man whose pleasures had rarely been simple. Ruthie sat beside him, 37 years old, a mother of 2. Her children played on the grass 20 feet away, chasing each other in circles, laughing the way children laugh when they believe the world is safe. She watched them with the particular attention of a parent who knows that safety is never guaranteed. A young man approached the bench, 22, maybe 23, well-dressed in a way that suggested he was trying to impress someone. He removed his hat as he drew near, a gesture of respect that the youth of the 60s rarely bothered with anymore. "Mr. Johnson, my name is Marcus. My father worked for you in the 50s. He told me a story about your daughter, about what happened back in 37. Bumpy did not turn his head, continued feeding the pigeons. "Told you, did he?" "Yes, sir. Said it was the most important story he knew. Said it explained everything about who you are, how Harlem works, why some things are sacred and some lines can never be crossed." Ruthie watched her father's profile. She knew this story too. The version she had been told as a child, the public humiliation, the apology, the $10,000, the happy ending where the bad men went away and never came back. She had never asked what really happened to those 3 men, had never wanted to know. Some questions are better left unasked. Some answers are better left unknown. "Mr. Johnson," Marcus continued, "I want to learn, want to understand how you built what you built, how you made everyone respect you, even the Italians, even the police, even people who should have been your enemies, how you became what you became." Bumpy finally turned to look at the young man, studied him for a long moment, then spoke. "Marcus, I will tell you one thing. Forget everything else, but remember this." "Yes, sir." "Money comes and goes. You make it, you lose it, you make it again. Power comes and goes. You have it, someone takes it, you take it back. Even reputation changes. Today they love you. Tomorrow they hate you. Next week they forget you existed." He paused, looked at Ruthie, looked at his grandchildren playing on the grass. "But family, Marcus, family is the only thing that stays, the only thing worth building, the only thing worth protecting." Another pause. "The only thing worth doing what is necessary for." Marcus nodded slowly, then ask the question he had come to ask. And those three? The ones who took her? What happened to them? Bumpy returned his attention to the pigeons. What three? Marcus understood. The conversation was over. He replaced his hat, nodded respectfully, and walked away across the autumn leaves. Ruthie waited until he was out of earshot, then turned to her father. Daddy. Yes, baby girl. I never asked you what happened to those men, the ones who took me. Bumpy tossed another handful of breadcrumbs. The pigeons fought over them briefly, then settled. No, you never did. I am asking now. He was quiet for a long time. A minute, maybe two. The children's laughter drifted across the grass. A car horn honked somewhere in the distance. The pigeons cooed and strutted. They made a mistake, Bumpy said finally. They paid for it. That is not an answer. It is the only answer I have, baby girl. The only one that matters. Ruthie nodded slowly. She had known, of course, had always known, somewhere deep down, that the story did not end with three men walking away into the sunset, that her father's mercy had limits, that some debts could only be paid one way. But knowing and asking are different things. And now she had asked, and now she had her answer. And it was enough. I still have the ribbons, she said. Bumpy looked at her. What ribbons? The white ones. Every year on April 14th, you bought me a new pair. Remember? Same shop on Lenox, same white satin, every single year. You kept them? All 31 pairs, in a box in my closet. Something shifted in his face. That same crack in the mask she had seen 31 years ago, kneeling in the middle of 147th Street, with her arms around his neck. Why? He asked. Because they remind me. Of what? Ruthie took his hand, the hand that had braided her hair that April morning, the hand that had held her when she ran to him across 20 meters of asphalt, the hand that had done things she would never ask about. That you came for me, that you always came for me, that no matter what happened, no matter who tried to hurt me, you were there, and you always will be. Bumpy looked at his daughter for a long moment, then at his grandchildren on the grass, then at the pigeons at his feet, then at the autumn leaves falling slowly through the October air. Always, he said quietly, always, baby girl. They sat together in silence after that, father and daughter, watching the children play, feeding the pigeons, letting the afternoon stretch toward evening. 7 months later, Bumpy Johnson died of congestive heart failure at a restaurant on 125th Street. He was 73 years old. The funeral drew thousands to the streets of Harlem. Politicians came, ministers came, businessmen and gangsters and ordinary citizens who remembered what he had meant to the neighborhood, for better and for worse. Ruthie stood beside the coffin in the church on Lenox Avenue. In her hand, she held something small and faded, a white satin ribbon, yellowed with age, the only one from the original pair, found on the back seat of a black Packard 31 years earlier. She placed it in the coffin, a final gift to the father who saved her, who made the kidnappers return her themselves, with apologies, with money, on their knees, and then made sure they never troubled anyone again. The criminal world remembered the lesson he taught that day, remembered it for decades, passed it down from generation to generation. Families are sacred, children are untouchable. Cross that line, and no apology will save you. No money will protect you. No distance will be far enough. Because men like Bumpy Johnson do not forgive, they simply wait. And in the end, justice always comes.